Dr. Arav Khan had always dreamed of working in a prestigious hospital, but when he finally stepped through the glass doors of Grandview Private Hospital, he knew this was more than just a workplace. It was a different world entirely. The lobby was adorned with marble floors, elegant chandeliers, and the kind of quiet efficiency that only came with serving the city's wealthiest elite. He was young, fresh out of his residency, and determined to prove himself. On his third week, he was handed a special assignment to monitor and care for Mrs. Eleanor Vance. The name alone was enough to make the nurses exchange knowing glances. She wasn't just any patient. She was a billionaire real estate mogul, a woman who had built her empire from the ground up. But now, she lay in the hospital's most secure and private room, trapped in a coma that had lasted for months. The official story was that Mrs. Vance had been in a tragic car accident, but within the hospital, whispers told a darker tale. Some said the brakes on her luxury sedan had been tampered with. Others believed she had powerful enemies who saw her incapacitation as an opportunity to seize control of her assets. Arav didn't put much stock in rumors, but he couldn't ignore the tension that seemed to linger in the air outside her room. Room 907, her suite, was unlike any other patient room. It had a private sitting area, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and security cameras that monitored every corner. Yet despite all this luxury, there was a certain coldness to it. The beeping monitors and the steady hiss of oxygen were the only signs of life inside. The first time Arav saw her, he was struck by how serene she looked. Her silver hair was neatly brushed, her skin pale but smooth, and even in this vulnerable state, her features carried a quiet strength. There was no sign of pain on her face, only an almost regal calmness. He approached her bed slowly, holding her file, reviewing her vitals. Everything was steady, stable, but unchanging. That evening, a heavy rainstorm swept through the city, and the hospital halls were quieter than usual. Arav's shift required him to perform a full checkup on Mrs. Vance, which included changing the dressings on her head wound. He wheeled a small tray of medical supplies into the room, closing the door softly behind him. The dim light from the bedside lamp cast long shadows across the floor, and the rhythmic sound of rain against the windows filled the silence. He spoke to her as he worked, not because he expected a response, but because he believed in treating patients like people, not cases. "Mrs. Vance," he said gently, "it's just me. Dr. Khan, I'm going to change your bandages now. You're doing fine." As he carefully unwound the gauze, his eyes were trained on her skin, checking for signs of infection. That's when something caught his attention. Her eyelids fluttered, just for a fraction of a second. His hands paused mid-motion. It could have been a trick of the light, or a normal reflex, but something in his gut told him it wasn't. He glanced at the heart monitor. There was a small spike in her heart rate. He leaned closer, studying her face. Her breathing was slightly faster now, almost as if she was aware of his presence. But before he could say anything, the rhythm evened out again, and she returned to stillness. Arav stood there for a moment longer, the silence pressing in around him. Finishing the dressing change, he stepped back, still unsettled by what he had seen. He made a note in her file. Possible eyelid movement, increased heart rate during dressing change. But he knew the senior doctors would probably brush it off. After all, they had already decided she was unlikely to wake up. But as Arav left the room that night, a strange thought wouldn't leave his mind. What if she's still in there, listening? The next morning, Dr. Arav Khan arrived earlier than usual, his mind still replaying the brief flicker of movement he had seen in Mrs. Eleanor Vance's eyes. To most, it would have been nothing. A stray muscle twitch, an involuntary reflex. But to him, it felt like something more. The hospital corridors were buzzing with their usual quiet activity. Nurses in crisp uniforms wheeled trolleys, monitors beeped from rooms, and the smell of antiseptic clung to the air. But as Arav approached the private wing, the atmosphere changed. Here, things were quieter, heavier, as if the air itself carried secrets. Just as he was about to enter Mrs. Vance's room, two voices caught his attention. He slowed his steps, hearing snippets of a hushed conversation between a middle-aged nurse and one of the hospital administrators. "Her nephew is pushing hard for her assets to be transferred," the nurse whispered. "And if she wakes up, the administrator replied, his tone edged with caution. That's the thing, the nurse said, glancing over her shoulder. The doctors keep saying it's unlikely, but... Her voice trailed off as she noticed someone approaching. Araba's presence made them quickly straighten, their professional masks snapping into place. Morning, Dr. Khan, the administrator said casually, but Arav could see the guarded look in his eyes. He gave a polite nod, hiding his curiosity, and entered the room. Mrs. Vance lay exactly as he had left her, still, pale, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But now, every time he looked at her, he couldn't shake the image of her eyelids moving. Was it real, or was he imagining it? He checked her vitals, recorded her temperature, and gently adjusted her pillow. It's me again, he murmured. I'll be here for most of the day. He wasn't sure why he kept talking to her. Perhaps it was instinct, or perhaps it was hope. Around noon, as the sunlight streamed through the tall windows, a man in an expensive tailored suit appeared at the doorway. He had sharp features, a neatly trimmed beard, and eyes that scanned the room like an appraiser, assessing property. You must be the new doctor, he said smoothly. I'm Charles Vance, Eleanor's nephew. Arav nodded, introducing himself. Charles didn't take his eyes off his aunt as he spoke. It's tragic, isn't it? All that brilliance, and now this. He gave a shallow sigh. She wouldn't want to be kept like this. You know, the word struck Arav as cold. She's stable, Arav replied firmly. And sometimes patients in comas do wake up, even after a long time. Charles smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. I suppose miracles happen. Still, I hope you won't give her false expectations. With that, he adjusted his cufflinks and walked out, leaving behind a faint trail of expensive cologne and unease. That evening, Arav was back in her room for routine checks. The rain from the previous night had cleared, leaving the city bathed in a golden sunset. He began changing her bandage again, his hands precise and gentle. Halfway through, he noticed it again. Her eyelids flickered. This time her fingers moved ever so slightly, curling against the bedsheet. His heart pounded. Mrs. Vance, can you hear me? He asked softly, leaning in. The heart monitor spiked. A faint tremor passed through her arm. Arav felt a surge of adrenaline. This was no reflex. She was trying to respond. Just then, the door opened, and Nurse Karen stepped in. Arav straightened quickly. She moved, he said urgently. Check the monitor. Karen glanced at the screen, then back at Mrs. Vance. Probably just a muscle spasm, she said dismissively. Don't get your hopes up. But Arav wasn't convinced. He had seen the intent behind that movement. However small it was, something inside told him that Eleanor Vance was fighting her way back. And if that was true, then someone, maybe more than one person, wasn't going to be happy about it. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the room, Arav made himself a silent promise. He would not only be her doctor, he would be her protector. The following day began like any other, at St. Gabriel's Medical Center. But for Dr. Arav Khan, everything felt sharper, more charged with possibility. His mind kept returning to the moment Mrs. Eleanor Vance's fingers curled beneath the sheets. That was no mere reflex. It was the first whisper of a soul clawing its way back to consciousness. When he entered her room that morning, the first thing he noticed was how peaceful she looked. The sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting warm golden patterns across her face. Arav adjusted her blanket and checked her IV line. Morning, Mrs. Vance, he said gently. I'm back, and I'm watching closely. As he began his rounds, he noticed something unusual. 2 security guards had been stationed outside the private wing. That was not standard procedure, even for wealthy patients. When he asked a nurse about it, she shrugged and said, Family orders. Mr. Charles Vance wants her room protected. Protected from what? Or from whom? Mid-morning, Arav returned to her room to change her bandage again. The procedure had become strangely intimate. His hands steady, his movements precise, his voice low and calm. As he worked, He noticed a subtle change in her breathing. It was deeper, more rhythmic, as if her body was slowly awakening. Then it happened again. Her fingers twitched, this time stronger. Arav froze, leaning closer. "Mrs. Vance, if you can hear me, try again." Her hand moved, faint but deliberate. His pulse quickened. "Good. That's good," he whispered. "You're in there. Don't stop." Suddenly, the heart monitor beeped faster. Her eyelids fluttered, and just for a second, her lips parted, as if she were trying to speak. Arav leaned in, straining to hear. Before he could respond, the door swung open. Charles Vance strode in, phone pressed to his ear. Irritation etched across his features. Yes, the transfer will happen once the paperwork is cleared," Charles said impatiently. Before noticing Arav, he ended the call abruptly and glanced at his aunt. "Any changes?" Arav hesitated. "She's showing increased responsiveness." "It's possible." Charles raised a hand. "Don't start filling her chart with false hope, doctor. We've been down this road before. She's not coming back." Arav's jaw tightened. "With respect, I disagree, and as a physician, it's my duty to continue treatment to the fullest." Charles's eyes darkened for a moment before he plastered on a thin smile. "Of course, doctor. Carry on." With that, he left the room. But Arav couldn't shake the feeling that Charles was not pleased with the possibility of his aunt waking up. That evening, Arav stayed late, monitoring her vitals and speaking to her softly. "You've got more to say. I can feel it," he murmured. "Don't let anyone keep you quiet." Then another surprise. Her hand moved again, but this time she gripped his wrist. It was weak, trembling, but it was unmistakable. Arav's breath caught. "Mrs. Vance? Eleanor? Squeeze if you can hear me." The faintest pressure answered him. His chest tightened with a mix of relief and disbelief. "Good. You're safe. I'm here." The heart monitor picked up speed, as if mirroring her determination. Arav quickly documented the response, but something told him not to share this detail just yet. Not with Charles, not with the administrator, not with anyone who might see her awakening as a threat. Before leaving, Arav whispered, "I don't know what you've been through, but I promise you, whatever happens, I'll protect you until you can tell your story yourself." Unseen in the shadows of the corridor, a figure lingered, watching him leave. And though Arav didn't yet realize it, his quiet promise had just made him a target. The rain hammered against the tall windows of St. Gabriel's Medical Center. As the night deepened, its rhythm almost in sync with the beeping of Mrs. Eleanor Vance's heart monitor, Dr. Arav Khan sat by her bedside, exhaustion tugging at his body, but his mind was wide awake. He couldn't shake the image of her frail hand, gripping his wrist earlier that day. It had been brief, yes, but it was enough to convince him beyond doubt. Eleanor was fighting her way back. The hospital was unusually quiet, the kind of stillness that feels deliberate, almost staged. Even the footsteps in the hall seemed muted. Outside her room, the two security guards stood like statues, their faces expressionless. Arav didn't trust them, not after Charles Vance's cold dismissal of his optimism. He leaned closer to Eleanor. "If you can hear me," he said softly, "don't be afraid. You're not alone." Her eyelids twitched just once, before falling still again. Arav's heart pounded. He knew this was the moment to push just a little harder. "Eleanor," he said, deliberately using her first name, "if you want to wake up, now's the time. I'm here. No one else. Just me." The heart monitor gave a small spike. Her breathing deepened, and then miraculously her fingers curled again, stronger than before. Slowly, with visible effort, her head shifted a fraction toward his voice. Arav held his breath as her eyelids fluttered open. It wasn't graceful. Her eyes moved sluggishly, unfocused, but they were open. "You." The word was so faint it was almost swallowed by the room.
Arav nearly fell forward.
"Yes, I'm here. I'm Arav, your doctor. You've been in a coma for months." Her lips trembled. Danger. Not safe. Before he could ask more, the door creaked open. Charles Vance stepped inside. his eyes narrowing when he saw her awake. Arav instinctively positioned himself between Eleanor and the door. "She's awake," Arav said firmly. "We need to stabilize her and begin immediate neurological assessment." Charles' smile was thin, forced. "Well, that's unexpected. But perhaps you should rest, Doctor. I'll stay with my aunt." "No," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling but urgent. "Don't leave." Her frail hand gripped Arav's again, and in that moment, he understood she was afraid of Charles. Deeply afraid. "I'm not going anywhere," Arav said, locking eyes with Charles. For a moment, the air in the room was thick with unspoken hostility. Then Charles stepped back, his face unreadable. "Do as you wish, Doctor, but I'll be speaking to hospital administration in the morning." After he left, Arav turned back to Eleanor. Her eyes, though heavy, carried a spark of desperation. "Listen to me," she whispered. "My will, they changed it. I never." Her words dissolved into coughs. Arav gently propped her up and gave her a sip of water. "It's okay. You can tell me later. Right now, you need strength." She shook her head slightly, her expression urgent. "Not later. They'll stop me." A chill ran through Arav. He knew then that waking her might have set into motion something dangerous for both of them. The storm outside intensified, thunder rolling over the city. Inside, the room felt equally charged, as if the walls themselves knew secrets were about to spill. Eleanor squeezed his hand again, her voice cracking with the effort. "You're the only one I trust. Don't let them send me away." Arav nodded slowly. "I promise." It was a promise that would change everything. Far down the corridor, a shadow moved. Someone was watching the room, and though neither of them could see it, danger was already closing in.